vert here, activate the move tool with W key, and I'm going to use this green circle here to move it on only the X and the Z axis, so it's not moving towards us on the screen. And I'm just going to try and evenly space these with the move tool. So I'm just trying to maintain this curve down to this point. So we don't want these nice and we don't want these flat. Basically, we want to keep this curve as best as we can. So something like that looks pretty good. So I'm going to hit space to drop the tool. And now that we've got this vert in position, we want to move this vert down into position, but we want to keep all of these guys evenly spaced. So what we're going to do is grab all of these verts on the left, and we're going to use the scale tool. So I'm going to activate it with R, and then I'm going to right click in line with this top set of verts, so something like that. And then I'm going to scale down on the Z axis and try and match the end of this curve here. So we'll end up something like down about there. So I'm going to scale out on the Z axis. And when we're about there, so this curve kind of continues down there, maybe a tiny little bit more. Something like that. Looks pretty good to me. And these guys remain nicely spaced, and this set of verts remains at the top of this curve here. So I'm going to hit space to drop the tool, and then we can go in and move these guys, because we're going to try and get some even space verts in here as well. So I'm going to select this vert first, and with the move tool, trying to retain this curve, I'm going to click on the green circle and just slightly tweak that so that we can get these a little bit more evenly spaced. I mean, it doesn't have to be perfect by any means, but just a little bit more even would be good. So that looks pretty good to me. That curve seems to be pretty much correct. So I'm going to hit space to drop the tool. Now the other thing is that this curve is still coming down here and then straight out. Same down here, this is coming straight down on this curve and then straight out towards the side of the pedal. And what we want that to do is actually keep following the curve. So I'm going to select all of these verts, and we're going to use a fall off again. So I'm going to come up to fall off and click on linear. I'm then going to click and hold on the right side up here and drag out to just past the left of these verts. Then I'm going to activate the move tool, the W key, and we're going to pull down slightly. So what am I doing here? Well, if you follow the linear fall-off shape there, the verts here at this part are getting 0% of the move, whereas the verts on the very outer edge are getting 100% of the move. So it's moving them down kind of diagonally to follow this curve. And that's what we want. So something like that looks pretty good to me. That looks pretty close. Might even be a little bit low, but we can fix that in a second. So I'm going to hit space to drop the tool, turn off our fall off by clicking none. And then these have moved slightly. This curve is perhaps slightly a little bit too low now. So what I'm going to do is activate the move tool, tweak these up a tiny little bit, then activate the scale tool, right click on this top vert, and just scale this up ever so slightly, something like that. So you can see it's just really a case of coming in and tweaking them until the polyflow looks correct. Now we could go in and do the same thing for these verts here, but to be honest, they're not particularly in need of that. It's these guys at the top and the bottom of the curve that are important. So with that done, we can now go in and bevel some edges. So I'm going to double click this edge loop. And you see it only selects up to there, so I'm going to shift and double click this one as well. That didn't select, so I'm going to shift double click the next edge in line, which gets the rest of that loop. I'm then going to shift double click this guy. We're going to have to do the same thing, so I'm going to shift double click this one to select that edge loop. And with them both selected, I'm going to activate the bevel tool with the B key. I'm going to right click in the viewport, and we're going to drag out an edge bevel, and only a small one, so 120 is okay, but our round level set to 2, we want that to 0 because we don't need any detail in there. And then I'm going to hit space to drop the tool, and we're going to have to go in and clean up a couple things. Notice on our corner here we created this tri-polygon, which has in turn created this guy, or turned this guy into a 5-sided polygon, which we don't want. So we're going to join this vert, so select that one, then shift click this one. So remember, we join our first selected to our second selected, and we come up to our vertex menu and click join, and OK, and that does that, and you can click OK. Then we're going to do the same thing up the top here. You see we've created this tri, which has turned this into a 5-sided poly, which we don't want. So we're going to join this vert into this vert. So select the first one, shift click the second one, and click join. Okay, 2 vertices joined. Okay, and that looks pretty good to me. However, before we create our button, we have one last thing to fix. And you can see it if I come and zoom in on this polygon here. Now I'm going to select this vert and this vert, and we expect these to be at the same level because we made this section here flat. However, if I go into a side view, you'll see that the one slightly closer to the middle of the pedal is in fact a lot higher than the one closer to the edge. Now why did this happen exactly? Well, all of the verts that we bent into position have been slightly raised on the y-axis. Now whether this is something to do with the bend tool or whether it's something that I did and didn't notice, it's a problem that we have to fix. So what I'm going to do is come in and lasso select around all of the verts that we initially bent into shape. I'm then going to go back to a side view, zoom in slightly at the top of this curve here, and activate the move tool. Now what I'm looking for is for that vert to be at the same y value as that other one. So we want this vert here to come down to that line. So I'm going to move this on the y-axis until that is about there. So minus 160 is about correct. So I'm going to hit space to drop the tool and go back to perspective mode. Now everything looks exactly as it should. So after saving our scene, we can now make a start on the button. So I'm going to bring back our ref objects. And you can see that we have to punch a hole through this screen object. And as this is quite dense at the moment, it has an awful lot of edges on it, we're going to do that in a new working mesh layer. So with that layer selected, I'm going to come up to the Basic tab and click on the Cube tool. And we're just going to draw out the shape of that button. Now I'm going to make that slightly larger than the hole in the reference image. And when you're happy, I'm going to hit space to drop the tool, and we can hide the screen layer. So with the mesh layer selected, I'm going to select that polygon. We can bevel that in slightly. So by now you should be used to adding that extra line of polygons around an inset. I'm then going to go to perspective view and zoom in slightly. I'm going to shift click to reactivate the bevel tool, bring it in again, so inset it and shift it down to create a top bevel. And then going to shift click again and drag this down to about there. Now this is actually going to make up the mesh of our button, so I'm going to cut that with Control X, go into a new mesh item, rename that Screen Buttons, and Control V to paste in that polygon. With that done, I'm going to reselect the mesh layer and click the eye next to Screen Buttons because we don't need to see that for now. Now I've still got the bevel tool selected, so I'm going to hit space to drop that, and we can start work on beveling these edges here. So I'm going to go to Edge Mode, and lasso select all of these edges, then hit B on my keyboard for bevel, and pull out an edge bevel with a round level of 0. So something like that looks pretty good to me. Now, if we go into the screen object, if we bring that guy back, we're going to have to connect these guys up somehow. And at the moment you'll notice that we've got an awful lot of polygons making up the screen object. In fact, some of them are completely pointless. Take for example, if I go into the screen layer, all of these guys down here. The fact that we've got a round level going this way is good because we're making up this nice smooth beveled edge. However, all of these extra polygons and edges going this way aren't adding anything to the model. In fact, they're just completely a waste of extra resources. We've added 170 polygons where we could have 6. So if we can somehow add in the button and clear this up so we have less polygons, that would be a great thing. And we can do that, and I'm going to show you how. So I'm going to deselect those polygons quickly. I'm going to go back into the mesh layer and we're going to position this at the correct height. So I'm going to double click it and go into a side view, zoom in, activate the move tool. I'm just going to pull that down until it matches the height of the screen object. With that done, I'm going to go back to perspective view, go into the screen layer, and we're going to delete all of these polygons. So what I'm going to do is grab all of these guys in here except for this last one. We're going to leave that one there for the minute. And with all of these selected, I'm going to hit delete on my keyboard to get rid of them. Now that we've got the space there, we can move this button mesh into the screen layer. So I'm going to click on the mesh, double click this and click Control X on my keyboard to cut it, select the screen layer and Control V to paste it in, and then we can right click on this mesh layer and delete to delete it. With that done, we can go in and start connecting these guys back up. So I'm going to click on the screen layer. Now we're going to be using the bridge tool again to add in all of these polygons. So remember, we need the same number of edges in each of these edge loops. So first of all, I'm going to come up and select this edge, shift click that one, and then hold down the up arrow, which will continue that selection, and then tap out to the end here. So I just want these guys that border this hole. And you'll see that we've got 36 edges. So if we now come down and have a look at this guy, we've clearly got 1, 2, 3 edges. So we need to add in 33 extra edges in order to connect this top edge here to the top edge of this buttonhole. So I'm going to come in, click one of these edges and Alt-C for the loop slice tool. I'm going to right click and add in 33 extra edges. Now with that done, I'm going to select all of these edges up the top here. Hold down the up arrow to keep selecting and then tap out the last few. I'm going to do the same down here. I'm going to shift click this first one and the second one, and then hold down the up arrow and then tap out the last few. So we're only going to these top bevels here. But with that done, we can come to the edge menu or the polygon menu, click on the bridge tool and right click, and we add in all of those polygons there. Now you'll notice that with all of these edges added, now that we've got a hole down here, these edges don't actually continue to this side. So here we've only got a single polygon along the width. So when we connect this to here, we're actually not going to need all these extra edges. We can actually get rid of all of these guys. And that's exactly what we're going to do. So I'm going to come in and drag along a couple of these edges, then hold down the up arrow on my keyboard to select along and tap out towards the end. Now I think I've gone one too far there, so I'm going to hold Control and drag over that guy. I'm going to hold down Shift and double click to select these edge loops and hit backspace to delete it. Now what we want to do is come down the side here and we're going to connect this edge up to here. So I'm going to select both of them, click the bridge tool and right click. We'll then do the same on the other side, select that edge, select this guy, bridge and right click, which will join those guys together. And then down here we only have one edge, but here we have 1, 2, 3. So we are in fact actually going to have to add in 2 extra edges on this section here. So I'm going to select one of these edges, Alt-C for the loop slice and right click, but we're going to change our count to 2 instead of 33. So we've saved ourselves a whole bunch of polys down here. We've really reduced that an awful lot, and that's always a good thing to look out for. So I'm going to hit space to drop the tool. I'm going to select this edge, shift select that one and that one. Then I'm going to shift select click that one, and that one. Come up to the bridge tool and right click to fill in the rest of those polys. Now you notice that this polygon here is kind of skewing a little bit into the center down the bottom here, and that's fine. It's not affecting the smoothing at all because we added this extra line of polys around the buttonhole. But just for kind of aesthetics sake, I'm going to grab these verts and move them slightly on the x-axis to just below this line here. In fact, I'll do the same with these guys. So just move those slightly. Ooh, I moved them slightly on the x-axis, on the z-axis there, so I'm going to undo that and then just make sure I grab the X handle like that. Move those into position. So now these guys this entire section has been reduced an awful lot. And you may notice that the bottom of our button is far too low at the minute, so we're going to go in and fix that. So I'm going to double click this edge loop. I'm going to go into a side view. We want to pull this up to this bottom section here. So I'm going to pull up on the y-axis, zoom in maybe a little bit more, and try and get that as close as we can. Something like that looks pretty good to me. So with that done, I'm going to hit space to drop the tool and go back to perspective mode. We're now going to add back in the bottom of the screen object. However, instead of adding in all of these polygons from scratch, we're going to use some of these top ones to help us. So with the screen layer selected, I'm going to come in and start selecting some of these polygons. And the first thing I'm going to do is select this loop of polygons we created around the button inset. So I'm going to select 2 and then hit L for loop. I'm then going to hit Shift and the up arrow on my keyboard to expand the selection once. And then holding down Shift, I'm going to select this polygon and these 3 as well. So with all of those guys selected, I'm going to hit Control C on my keyboard and paste them into a new mesh layer with Control V. With that layer still selected, I'm going to double click the polygons and move them down slightly. Let's switch to a side view quickly. You notice we do have some depth and height in there, so I'm going to hit the scale tool, which is R, and set the Y scale to 0, like that. With that done, I'm going to move these back up into position with the move tool. So something like that. Go to perspective mode. If we go to the bottom, at the moment you can see that we can actually see through these polygons because they're facing the wrong way. So I'm going to flip them around with the F key. They become much more solid like that. And I'm going to cut them with Control X and paste them back into the screen layer. Before we forget, we can delete that extra layer over there. So I'm going to select the screen layer again, and we can go in and start connecting up some of these holes. Now the first thing I want to connect up are these two edge loops in here. So basically what's happened is these aren't quite at the same level. So what we can do is basically use the bridge tool. I've selected both of these edge loops. Select the bridge tool and right click to join them up. I'm going to hit space to drop the tool, then come in and select this bottom edge loop like this and hit the backspace key to get rid of it. Now you notice that we've got this outer line of polygons here. And then we've got this inner line, and this should be where our bevel is, but at the moment our bevel is pretty much non-existent. And we can fix that by going to Edge Mode, double-clicking this edge loop here, activating the Move tool, and then moving these on the Y-axis, like that. So with that done, I'm going to hit space to drop the tool, and we can start filling in some of the other polygons. I'm going to come to this edge down here, start selecting these edges that we want to fill in with the bridge tool. You notice because we copied and pasted them, they've got the same number of edges in each loop that we're connecting. So with these 14 selected, I'm going to come up to the bridge tool and right click to fill those in and hit space to drop the tool. And then going to skip this corner and fill in these side ones. So select both those edges, bridge tool, right click to activate. We can then zoom in on this corner, double click that edge loop and hit P to fill it with a polygon. And then obviously this is an n-gon, it's not 4-sided or 3-sided, so we need to fix that. So I'm going to deselect those edges, activate the edge slice tool with the C key, and drag an edge from the middle of this curve here to this edge there. And that turns both of these into quad polygons. We can then fill in the rest of this bottom area of the screen object. So I'm going to start by selecting these edges. I'm going to miss out this first edge here, shift select these second two, and then hit the up arrow on my keyboard to the very end. So I'm going to tap out the last couple like that. We've got 40 edges selected there. I'm then going to come into this part, miss out this corner, shift select this first edge and the second edge, and then tap the up arrow to the very end. And you'll notice we have 80 edges selected, which means we've got 40 in this part and 40 in this part, so we can use the bridge tool to connect them up. Now all we need to do is add in this last polygon. We're going to start with a corner here, and what we're going to do is the same as we did down the front. So for that we need an extra edge along here, so I'm going to activate the loop slice tool, and with the count of 1 I'm going to drag this into position about there. I'm going to hit space to drop it and create that polygon on the corner there, like so. So I'm going to select all those verts in a clockwise direction and hit P on my keyboard to create a polygon. And then going to split that up with the edge slice tool, which is the C key, into 2 quad polygons like that. Now what we need to do is fill in this last section. So I'm going to double click the edge loop and hit P to fill it with a single poly. And you notice that this thing looks kind of crazy. It's flipped out on us and gone completely white. And this happens sometimes when you've got a lot of edges coming into the same kind of area like this. So we're going to go down these one by one and create these into quad polygons. So first of all I'm going to select one of these edges here. Alt-C for the loop slice tool. I'm going to drag it out like that. And you see instantly that polygon has sorted itself out. It's kind of reconfigured it because you've got an extra point on that edge there. So I'm going to drag this out to about that level, space to drop the tool, activate the edge slice tool and draw an edge between them like that. So now all of these are quad polygons, which is what we want. And now we're going to change these into quads. I'm going to start off by activating the edge slice tool and drawing an edge from there to there, which turns this into a quad polygon. I'm going to do the same on the other side of this. So I'm going to draw an edge from there to there, which changes this into a quad polygon. Now we need 1, 2, 3 extra cuts along this section here. So I'm going to select an edge, loop slice tool with Alt-C, and right click, change the count to 3. And with that done, we can use the edge slice tool to add in the rest of these cuts, like so. Now all that remains is for us to bevel this bottom section, so I'm going to double click one of these edges to select that loop, double click this guy to select this loop, and I'm going to come in and manually select those two. I'm going to come up to this section and keep selecting some of these guys. And then I'm going to double click this one, which will select up to this corner, double click this one, which will select up to there, and then all of these. So with all of those edges selected, I'm going to hit the B key for bevel and drag out a small bevel like that. With that done, it's just a case of quickly checking around the edge to make sure that we haven't created any tri-polygons by mistake. And it looks like we're good. So with that done, we can now start work on actually creating the button itself. So now that we're creating the button and the little screw object that sits on top of the screen, we're back to basically beveling, edge slicing, moving verts and stuff like that. So I'm going to run through this section fairly quickly. So I'm going to bring back the screen buttons like that. And what we want to do is grab this polygon, go into the top view, and we're just going to scale it down slightly so there's a little gap in between the hole and the actual button itself. And I'm going to go to perspective mode. I'm going to pull this up to just inside the button, like that. And I'm going to hit the extrude key, which is the X key, to pull this up. I'm going to go into a left view to match our reference, like that. And you'll notice that on our reference, the top of this button is curved, so we're going to have to add that in. So I'm going to go to perspective mode. I'm going to hit space to drop the tool. I'm going to select one of these edges, and I'm going to hit the Alt-C key for the loop slice tool and right click. We're going to add in 5 edges, like that. Now with those done, I'm going to hit space to drop the tool and go back to a side view, and we're basically going to shape these manually, as there aren't a ridiculous amount this time. We can probably get away with it quite easily. Now what I've done is select the middle one and pull that up to the top level of the curve. So we want to get it to about the top of the button curve like that, and then I'm going to select the 2 on the other side of it and pull those up, as these are going to be the same level as each other, so something like that. Then I'm going to do the same, grab those 2 and pull those guys up like that. I'm going to go back to perspective mode and just check that that looks pretty smooth, which it does. So I'm going to hit space to drop the tool. I'm going to select this edge, oops, sorry, these very corner edges here, and we're going to bevel them, but actually I'm going to bevel all of these side edges at the same time. So that one, and these guys as well. I'm going to hit B for bevel and pull out bevel like that. What we'll do is actually up the round level to 2 on these objects, pull that out a little bit further like that, so we get a nice button object. I'm now going to go to the bottom of the screen button and just delete these bottom polygons, as no one's ever going to see them. With that done, I'm then going to go to the top view and start thinking about how to create these screen screws. Now just like the power unit and the jack inputs, it's a case of creating 2 cylinders, one for the main body and one for the indent in the middle, but ensuring that this outer one has a number of edges divisible by the number of edges on this inner one, so that we can connect them together using the bridge tool. So the first thing I'm going to do is create this outer cylinder using the cylinder tool in the basic tab and making sure that it matches both our top ref and our side ref. Okay, so I've created this cylinder, and you'll see that it matches both the left reference there and also this top reference. Now I've created it with an equal radius in both directions, and it's got 36 sides. Now why 36? Because it's divisible by the number of edges on this inner cylinder here, which is 6, so it should connect up quite easily with the bridge tool. With that done, I'm then going to go in, grab this top polygon and bevel it in slightly so it's just outside where our inner cylinder is going to sit, so somewhere around there. Then going to hit delete and space to drop the tool. Now with that done, I'm going to go back to perspective mode, quickly grab this bottom edge by double clicking and bevel it out slightly. So just about there. Space to drop the tool, and then going to inset this bottom polygon and delete it, and then hit space to drop the bevel tool. I'm going to temporarily hide the screen layer and go into a top view. We want to draw out that inner cylinder. So I'm going to come up to the cylinder tool and drag out this shape here. We want both of these radiuses to be the same. We want the number of sides to be 6. So that looks pretty good to me. So I'm going to hit space to drop the tool, go into perspective mode. We need to make sure that that sits at the top of this screw object. So in a side view, I'm just going to pull that into position with the move tool. And when I'm done, I'm going to hit space to drop the move tool, and we can start thinking about how to join these up. Now first of all, I'm going to grab this polygon. I'm going to inset it slightly, shift click and inset it again, and shift it down to create that top bevel. And then going to shift click and pull it down into the base of the pedal, into the base of the screw, sorry. I'll then shift click one more time, drag down and inset slightly, shift click and inset that one more time, and then delete it. We're just going to delete that polygon for the minute. Now what I want to do is slightly bevel all of these edges on this inner cylinder. So I'm going to grab all of these guys. I'm just shift double clicking to grab all those loops. I'm going to hit B for bevel, just bevel these out slightly, like that, so we've got a round level of 0. Now, let's have a look at our edge count. So on this outer cylinder, we have 36 edges. On this inner one, we have 12 edges, so we have to add in 24 extra edges to this inner cylinder. Now we have 6 sides, and 24 divided by 6 is 4. So we want to add in 4 extra edges on each of these sides. So I'm going to grab these edges here, and with our loop slice tool, which is Alt-C, I'm going to right click and set the count to 4. And then I'm going to hit space to drop the tool and double check our edge count. So if I double click this one now, you'll see we've got 36 edges. If I double click this guy, we've got 36 edges there as well. So I'm going to shift click to select them both, come up to the edge menu, click the bridge tool and right click. And with that done, all that remains is for us to double click this outer loop and bevel that with the B key. And we're going to add a little bit more of a round level to that, so a round level about 2. So something like that. And then I'm going to hit space, and we can fill in that middle polygon. So I'm going to double click that edge loop. I'm going to hit the Z key for the extend tool, right click to activate it, and then instead of scaling it in or moving it at all, I'm going to come up to the vertex menu and click join averaged. It's going to say 36 vertices joined. We just get a single vertex in the middle of that hole. So now we can double click this guy, go to the top view. I'm going to hit Control C for copy, Control V for paste, and we're just going to move this into position down there. Now I'm going to rotate it slightly on the y-axis like that, then come to a side view and move it down into position. I'm just going to bring back our screen layer to ensure that we can get the screw to sit just on top of it, like that. And with that done, all that remains is to mirror all of this over to the other side as well. So I'm going to come into the screen layer, I'm going to double click the entire object, come up to the duplicate menu, I'm going to click on the mirror tool, and with the axis set to X, I'm going to click apply. So that looks pretty good to me. Now I'll do the same for the buttons, so I'll come to the button layer, double click the button object and duplicate mirror. I'm going to hit apply, and that will copy the button over to the other side. And then finally we'll do the same in the screws layer, so we'll double click this top screw, shift double click this bottom one, duplicate, mirror and apply. That adds in all of our extra screen detail. So if we go in now and bring back all of our other layers one by one, you'll see that our Boss Tu-2 effects pedal is now completely modelled. Okay, so all that remains for us to do is tidy up our item list. So I'm going to select the main body layer and then going to control click these other mesh layers, just missing out the refs group, and then hit Control G on my keyboard to group them together. I'll rename that guy to boss Tu-2. So we can now toggle that on and off as much as we want and move it about as a single object. So I hope you've enjoyed the tutorial. I hope it was concise and clear. Please leave me any comments you might have on either the style of it. If I've missed anything out or gone too quickly in places, just let me know, ask me any questions, and I'll try and get back to you. The whole point of this really was as an introduction to Modo and how it can speed up your modeling workflow, and I hope you've come away with kind of a feeling of just how that's true. I can't recommend enough getting involved over in the Luxology forums. They have a great community over there. They have a huge amount of training as well, which goes into a lot more detail than I can afford to go into in these tutorials. And I can't recommend them enough. They're really, really well put together. And you know, I hope you've had fun. I hope you've come up with something that's good and you can see how to put the techniques to use on other objects as well. You can also contact me on Twitter. I'm at badgranola. That's BADGRENOLA. So feel free to contact me on there and I'll try and get back to you if I can. But until next time, thanks very much. Cheers.